Auzubillah Minash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Today is the 23rd of the July, and last night I was basically into my room again, and I was expanding my time as to understanding the global civil issues. This is a new term which the advocate Gulrez King itself invented, that which sort of the elements in the concept of the demoralization as per the known capacitated thoughts. Whole of the night I was into the digital and non-digital documentations as to observing the constraint lines. When I just cross multiply the ultimate aggressive ratio of the childbirth, this is the number one point which should be acknowledged by the Republicans within their houses without having the any sort of the anxiety into their brain. This is a very social issue under the civil subordinate point as well. But the concept of the civil issues in the Pakistan is raising and are raising, and the concept of the multiplication of the population into the minus degrees declined. The restoration of the observation of the conjugal relationships deferred. So when all these elements just reflects into the common contradictory opinions, I just said that the contradictory opinions of the surrounding, when which sector just appealed in the public sector should have been acknowledged by the common citizens under the mass transit disorder, fiscal constitutional obligation of the same. In fact, the concept of the decentralization of the Senate, Parliament, and the other lounges through the Electronic Transaction Ordinance 2002. Today, I would like to interpret the Electronic Transaction Ordinance 2002, that why it was enforced in the central limits of the Pakistan, and what was the purpose of the same. In fact, and we all of us together should have to acknowledge that the electronic mediums into the centralization and the digital mode of the assessment of the humans, video confessions and the audio confessions through the electronic mediums used by the primary sector. Today, it is another factor that the audio and the video which is being recorded through one personal asset. Yes, this is the law. When you don't have the personal asset and you're just raising the slogan of the assets of the public commodity, and while mobilizing the public commodity, while mobilizing and using and utilizing the public commodity, the public is found as raising of the electronic transaction minus transitional areas and fighting up of and about the rights of the government machinery applied one in the Pakistan today. As a matter of grace, you can observe around your surrounding as per my judicial observation, which I just invest within myself as to observe these social confinement of the public deflected thoughts into their houses as well. Let me take tea. Thereof, when I just comprehend the comprehension of the compression of compassion of the composite side of the comparison, compassionate points of the public deflected, and they all are trying to convince their surrounding as to rotating in the public sector without having the reciprocating area of measurable transaction of the fiscal motivated transitional incomes. I'm always confined these thoughts with myself that public should have to acknowledge these points within their houses. But in spite of that, the common citizen in the Pakistan are found as to just yelling over the others without having the area of the principal measurement of the principal debtors. When I just confine that term, the principal data judgment narrative facts, I'm inventing a lot of the terms by myself, Advocate Gulrez King. The area of working of the non-measurable transitionals and having the burden of proof from the other side in the public sector is another offensive attitude which is not being observed by any sector of the Republican. The occupancy over the governance machinery is a crime which is not being observed by either sector in the central divisional benches of the Pakistan. And the asset disposal in the wrong direction of the federal board of the revenue and the provincial autonomy in the central limited groups of the Pakistan. When I just observe all these confronting points throughout the depiction of the true facts into the interpretations of the electronic transaction ordinance 2002 applied in the Pakistan from more than 18 years now, and the central litigant in interest or the Pakistanis are not in the positions to observe the paper documentations, and the culture of reading of the newspaper into the Pakistan is negated and is not being observed by the central litigant of the Pakistanis and the private capacity of the same. In fact, the governance is trying to appeal that I'm just observing last night the central observation dissolved transactions in the transitional areas. The transitional areas measurable should have been acknowledged and should have been observed by the central litigant in interest of the central Pakistan as well. When I just comprehension, when I just have the comprehension of doubts against my comprehended doubts, then I just come up with the next thought that the raised amounts of the boys and the females just let them into the public gutters and the public alleys while just puffing off the smoke into the dark dirt, and after that compiling the wrong sides of the central litigant of charts as well. The compassionate triangles of the Republicans into the you can consume that fact into the hotels. I just dictate through the police order, the preamble of the police order, and the all of the section of the same just dealt and deal always with the central non-compiled observation order, that if any Pakistani is found as to using and mobilizing the hotel, and the hotel is in charge with the electronic devices, and such individuals are trying to celebrate the commutation of the marriages. Now, hereby, when I just observe that the commutation of the marriages, then I come up with the next thought by myself, Gurrez King. In the Pakistan, the culture, the primary and the social culture of the hotels in the Pakistan is an offensive attitude. Such hotels should be sealed out because they are providing such basic amenities out of no necessity, and installation of the cameras in the public rooms after providing them the rooms into the personal vendetta, and having the illicit pornography activities. And the secondary factor in the Pakistan, I observed that the males which have and which were groomed under the hate speech, this is a brutal fact which I just observed throughout the practice area of my life, that when you just comprehend with the comprehension of the section 164 of the CRPC and 164A of the CRPC, the code of the criminal procedure, you just come up with the next thought in the Pakistan that the the testification of a victim of the rape under the section 164A, and the public is so disaster outside their houses that they're willingly and they are disastrously go in the public courts in order to contest the section 164, but they don't know that the section 164A CRPC code of the criminal procedure 1898 amended one waited and waiting ahead for the same. In fact, thereof, when this advocate, advanced comparative constitutional advocate, while having the possession of the 7 years and more than of the practice of the legal pure judicial insights inside the courtrooms and outside the courtrooms, observe the central targeted individuals, that those individuals victimized through the section 164 and 164A. First, you just launch a case through the section 164 code of the criminal procedure that your female is a vagabond female, and you are having the possession of the same, in fact, and you are just refusing to have the custodial issue, and after that you just have a lot of children from the same female, and after before a lot of the years expanding to the same, you just comprehend the comprehension of doubt that such female was not fallen into the Article 199 and Article 184 clause 1, 2, 3. Why I always dictate Article 184? The original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court always comprehend with the subordinate courts, but when we just apply the subordinate court rules, resolutions, there would be no appealing order, standing order as well. In the same depiction of the true facts of the legal sides, I'm just talking about my practicing area, personal practicing area, without having the remuneration wages of anyone. I was so willingly and so legally bound to acknowledge the facts of the Republicans into the public sides that I was very practical in the practical phraseologies. That's why I just apprehend when I just started to practice during the year of 2016. I just remember myself that after completion of my LLB, I was into the civil court, and I just observed a lot of the issues, human issues by the humans, and the confinement of the self-generated explanations to the same, in fact, is an objected question which is not subjected in the articles of the Constitution and of the subordinate laws and the publications. I just observed these factors by myself throughout my practice, and after that I was observing that the homogeneous sort of the sexual transmitted and non-transmitted issues in the Pakistan, and the females out rated and our destined with the facts of the modesty and the scientific disapprovals of the conjugal relationships after having the section 164 CRPC code of the criminal procedure in the Pakistan. I am observing these factors by myself, and the concept of the section 164A, the victim of the rape, is the secondary fact which is not being accommodated in any code of the law. Because when you just draw inference about a section 164 of the code of the criminal procedure, thereby the secondary factor is the section 164A, the victim of the rape, you are trying to convince a person of the code that you were not in the positions to observe the secondary and the primary issue of the both sides, but you were having the possessions of the insights of the judicial obesities. And I'm just observing these objectives and the object lines of the constitutional domains by myself whole night and day, night and overnight, and always confused to confess the confessions of the public admissions into the Article 180, Article 128 of the Kanune Shahadat Order 1984, amended 1 and applied 1 in Pakistan. Thereby, when I just comprehend with the compression of the amplified altitudes of the Republicans, I'm totally outvalued in that scenario. While when a female is being outcasted, and in some cases I'm observing the police station in the Pakistan, and I have observed the police station in the Pakistan, that in the Pakistan it is an settled precedent in the police customs, that I said that the settled precedent in police custom that a police in the Pakistan always 90%, not 10% remainder are good. The 90% of them are having the installed machinery of the females outside the police station, and such females are found as to begging, and after that they just make the road accident police illustration, and after that they just arrest the person in the car or in the vehicle under the section 516 code of the criminal procedure CRPC and 516A of the code of the criminal procedure, in order to make a superdari case against the same, in fact, as per my observations throughout my practical nexus. And after that they just let the person who is in the car that the road accident had been communicated, and he is or she is subjected with the ultimate aggression of the public tyranny because of not compiling, or he or she is being in restless position in the jail. And these all depiction of the facts of the public maintenance order 1960. I always object with these points that the public maintenance order in the Pakistan is a mandatory obligation, that the public maintenance order 1960 applied and enforced in the whole of the Pakistan, and section 4 should have been renderized by the central observing litigant in interest and the official capacity and the government private capacity and the public precedent in customs and the social anxiety individuals. And I'm totally convincible, but I'm not invincible in these days. So try to convince me with the invincible invincibility as well. But the question remains that the restlessness of the mind is a question which is not being accustomed and tuned with the brains of the Republicans. They are into the thoughts of the liberal, but when I just observe that they are conservative into the liberalism as well. Why you are liberal in the public sector when you are in the not in the liberal position in your houses, in your homes, in your official mandate? You are not liberal. So you are saying that you are liberal. Every sectarian broken individual always said that he is very liberal, but that is not a question that is going to be acknowledged by this advocate Gulrez King itself. The question into the public maintenance order 1960 should be accompanied by the governance of the Pakistan, because I figured it out after revisionating a lot of the years, practicing years, that the consumption of the wrong sides of the fiscal years into the tax years, and after that claiming to be the perfect mode of the assessment by the political parties outside the public gutters, outside the public scheming areas, outside the properties of the same. I recommend to the state government of the Pakistan, the statutory bodies of the Pakistan, and the Public Maintenance Order Section 14 that produce produce a document that who is the owner of the property of the parliament in the Pakistan, that who is the owner or co-owner or co-beneficial or co-beneficiary of the property of the Senate, and who is the person who is the co-beneficiary, co-owner, co-accused, co-guilty of the parliament and of the reciprocating area. Likewise, I mean to say that of the Lahore High Court, Supreme High Court, there might be the individuals whose property have been snatched. Because I am a civil lawyer. So, as a civil lawyer and the perfect civil lawyer, I just raise a landmark outstanding judicial question in the Lahore High Court and in the Supreme High Court, that those courts should have to provide a document that who is the owner of those courts, those police station, those areas of working through filing of their income tax returns. Then I'll follow that who is the owner. But Section 114 Clause 1, and through well statement, that who is the owner of the property of the High Courts and the Supreme Court and the other reciprocating area of the Pakistan. That's why who is the owner of the Parliament and who is the owner of the Senate, the property of whom such transactions, illicit transactions have been communicated to the public, and the public is so disastrous that such public is not willing to observe the same. In fact, thereby it is to be accompanied by the Republicans that if they are not in the positions to observe the confinement of the first, you cannot draw any inference out of the property of the secondary or the primary person as per my dictation, as per the lordship. When I just observe all of these facts, that the properties belong to the primary federal government, and the federal government employer or employers are not in the positions to contest an open election petition against the same, that this property belongs to the federal government, and you cannot rule or overruled any sort of the parliamentary legislative enactment throughout of the practice of the other person or other secondary primary individual. You are not itself your individual. You don't have the possession of any adversary rights or adverse possession. I always raise the concept of the adverse possession in the codes, the civil codes, that it is not mandatory that a person who is in the possession is not in the adverse possession. While I'm providing an illustration, an open illustration to the Republicans, that while you are having the possession over your official mandate, and you are trying to convince the other person that such person is not in the possession of the official mandate through the adverse possession, they apply civil law through the CLCs comprehended by the Lahore High Court, Supreme High Court, Supreme Court. But the individuals in the Pakistan, into the parameters of the declining and juxtaposition of the same into the relaxing hours of the same, and they are trying to convince the invincible individuals who are trying to be the best side, treated to be the point of the treatment under the threat of the doubts, under their consumption of the malified intention. I just observe these points throughout my practice, that the individuals are not trying to come person and the person are not trying to become the individuals. These battles have been started from the year 2002, and because of the presidential sorts of the orders in the Pakistan, in the demo of the so-called biasness, and after that I just observe all these depiction of the facts into the bylaws. I am still observing these facts by myself. Thereby the digital documentation, the non-digitalized amounts, the anti-money laundering cases, the private money cases, the anti-narcotics cases, and the overused and the PHA, Parks and Horticulture Authority in the whole of the Pakistan. Today, I'm trying to represent the Park and Horticulture Authority in the Pakistan, PHA. The 92% parks, the remainder, the rest of the 8% are perfect, but the 92% parks in the Pakistan are in the position of not having the proper sort of the employees and employers, and that's why such parks are depicting the permanent area of living of the drug peddlers and drug sellers, and those drug sellers and drug peddlers are just selling the drug peddlers, and after that they are found as to using and abusing the females in the parks, and they sometimes seduce under the PPC, likewise open seduction in the parks. And after that sometimes section 294 PPC applied their obscene songs and activities. I apply section 294 as a magistrate of the third class, that the central litigant properties under the federal governance of the Pakistan, which are not registered under any documentation of the Federal Board of the Revenue, are hereby to be registered under the Federal Board of the Revenue (FBR) to the state laws and the statutory bodies. That there must be an employer and employee, and those employers will be discharged in the public headquarters into permanent residential areas to observing the approved area of not there might be abuse narcotic individuals, they are, and those are not only drug users, they are found as to injecting the injection inside their bodies, just like inject insects, because they have left the habit of considering themselves to be human. But I'm a human, that's why I'm just raising the landmark judicial outstanding question for the rest of the individuals, that why the central obligation of the same is the resilience in the public parks, while those individuals are found as to just injecting their bodies, because such individual doesn't know the value of the human, and that's the way such humans are trying to defect the infectious area of living of the same. I'm raising an outstanding landmark judicial question in the Lahore High Court, in the Supreme High Court, in the area of my praxis and the area of the peripheral area of living as well. The concept of the colonization and the concept of not having the possession of the digital documents, the concept of not appealing to the comprehension of the doubts, the concept of not the presumption of under assumption, the presumption of under assumption, and the public is trying to repel the compulsive commodities while not having the possession of the documentations as to raising the doubts. The poverty, again another case outside my house, you can observe that I'm totally tired of such sort of the felonious individuals, but leave apart that. Today, I'm again in the mood that to understand that the electrical issues in the Pakistan, in the same depiction of the facts, when I just comprehend myself with the comprehension of the reflexing hours, that which sort of the elements are being derived by the Republicans by their self, and not to be a point of the self optimizing the same, the 95% individuals are not in the position, they are in the positions to just a position of the sexual observation into the intellectual properties. Sexual position into the intellectual property is another crime in Pakistan in criminology, in the adverse possession, which is not being observed by any Pakistani itself in its house, in its office. And while of all of these sudden provocative transitional non-transitional parameters, what they commit and their whereabouts tantamounted, that they are not in the position. When you just raise the right of yourself, they just said that you don't have the right to comprehend yourself, you don't possess any sort of the adversarial area of living, so the lineal parameters of yours around it or surrounded by you are always in the position to defer your points in the deflection of the doubts. The concept of the living of the public veracity under the public continual parts of the output sorts of the taxation. I said that the output sorts of the taxation is a concept which is deceased, which is being deceased in the public sector, and the public is enjoying the basic amenities to life for free. And after that, all of these transactions, they just comprehend that they were approved guilty association in the poverty belt lines, and they cannot deal with any person because they are suffering from all of these areas. And the overseas concept in the Pakistan, I'm totally shocked to observe the cases of the overseas by myself, by my observation of the conceptual degrees of the same, that in the Pakistan it is a settled principle that just if you are an overseas, then you have a lot of fins. You are out of Pakistan and you are unnatural person. This is a concept in the Pakistan, and the Pakistanis are so disaster that if you are an overseas and in the Pakistan and you're trying to convince the other side that the overseas laws, I recommend the Anti-Money Laundering Act over the overseas, that their males accounts should be sealed out in the Lahore High Court, that why and where from such females have generated a lot of capitals in the gross inventories, and such overseas cases of the non-custodial battle is a question which I just always felt ashamed to customed by myself, that overseas in the Pakistan raised amounts of the females, and after that raising the burden of the proof to the other side, that such a sector is not in the eliminated factor of the subjected laws of the consignment of the objected consonants of the judicial inside of the Pakistan. When I just observe all of these wrong sides of the Republicans, that they are into the habit of constructive negation of the laws, publications, into the publications of the self-motivated provocation of the attitudes of their personal self-esteem. I'm just inventing a lot of phraseologies by myself. There is no one who just reciprocate to help me. But this is the king, the king itself composed every composure of decomposed factor of the public sector into the public legacy. The concept I just observed, that while the public is just trying to controverse with the controversial mediums of the same, despite of all these ingredients, what they expect is a question. The expectations of the unexpected life is a question which is an input into the output. When you just apply the guardian ad litem cases would be there, while you were not in the positions to lay a foundation of the guardian, de facto guardian, while you were in the position that you have the de facto guardianship, and you are trying to have the guardian ad litem in the Pakistan as a workforce union in the universities, in the colleges, and those unions are not in the positions to comprehend the compression of the laws into the compassionate legal observations, judgments. I am just observing all these observations, deferred orders by myself. I am the one who is suffering from the public disorder, the public individuals under the tranquilities of the surrounding of the same. When I just observe all these depiction of the wrong sides of the individuals by myself throughout the decade, I just remorse those days, but leave apart, that was a tragical event which I just invest in myself. But you can say that experimental area of living is in the principal outburst, but I'm not in the position, and I will not observe anyone beside myself into the public sector, because I observe the public more than a decade, that those publicans are not in the positions to have the laws reconciled one. They are in the positions to sell the laws unreconciled one, and into the matter of the non-digital amounts. And the labor class in the Pakistan is not only criminal. I always said that they are more than criminal. The upper limit of the labor class is a randomized sort of individuals, but the labor class is criminal. The poor class is more than criminal, and all of them just want the laws and order to be compiled by the judicial officers in the perfect mode of assessment to their self. Why? I raise a landmark judicial question. Why should the judicial officers, standing officers, would render any service to the those individuals who are not comprehended with the proper laws in their houses after renterization of the constructive years, and to raising a stroking to their females, and such females are so found as to be stroked that such females doesn't know the physical intangible losses and intangible and tangible physical losses to the same during, because of the concept of not observing the scientific approved transactions as well. I always said that when I was rotating myself into the public sector without having the public remuneration, I was rotating myself after completion of my LLB. There was no one who just let me that to go into the public sector to order to admire the public mistakes or defer the mistakes. I was there to observe myself, where do I stand in the public sector. Then I will shocked to observe that above board, and the public is not even in the middle of their lives because of their non-practical observation of their self. The question is that which is not being observed, that why all of the central and non-central non-observation order, the Supreme Judicial Council is above board and the High Court is above board, but the individuals under the in-person capacities even in not in the middle of their lives, they are just expecting the expectations of the doubts. When I just apply the law without even the observation of anyone, I'm totally assuming the issues that the females are not only feeling the concept of the diseases inside their houses without the reciprocating area of livings. Such females are trying to beat the odds, and the males are trying to confine the rest of the same. And due to all of these strikes, which are not in the position of the expensive sorts of the litigations, I observed that the expensive sort, because I'm very expensive lawyer, but the public is not, they cannot you can say that they don't they are not in the positions to buy me from, I'm not purchasable. So the question which I said that the experimental area of public and the exposure of the public disaster and the public not compiling issues and the overload of the public reproduction and the reproduction of the over misguided missiles in the public sector, and the concept of not observing the constraint of the personal livings into the official ones and the official ones not into the public one, and the multiplication of the population, and after that not observing the extreme yards of the same, and after that what we observe is the condonation of the section 5. And when we just go in any code of the law, we just observe the digital documentation into the private capacity and the private capacity, and both individuals do not have the idea why they were under the illegal ideologies of the councils of the common interest into the international humanitarian negligence. Both of them are suffering from the humanitarian negligence, and both of them don't have the idea why they were being in the international you can say that surrendered position on unsupported materials. So you can say I'm not reading statutes, I'm just delivering the statute which I just observed by the public themselves. They were and they are still in the positions to observe the non-resilience battles in the public sector made and composed by themselves, and they are not in the positions to observe in their household appliances issues to resolve those matters through their transitional incomes and through their non-transitional incomes. Those incomes would not be generated by the same in the retroactive ruled out years in the whole of the central Pakistan as well. Especially in these subdivisional areas, whenever you go there, you just apply that the central subdivisional resident in the occupancy are not in the position. They never thought that they were in the positions to observe the self explanations of the points of the constitutional mandates. The constitutional mandate chose and had been chosen by itself, but the public in the transitional sorts of the private and the public capacity are trying to communicate the science of the not compilations of the public orders under the restless of the positions. I'm the person in the whole of the globe who just comprehend a law in the Pakistan about the intangible and non-tangible rights of the females in the Pakistan. I'm look at me. This is the advanced comparative constitutional. Your judicial officers, your police officers, your every department, none of them have no digital value amount of such rights. I'm still the person who generated those documents by myself over my shoulder, over the exposure of the public educational bias, over the exposure of my personal vendetta into the private capacity in the public official mandate, over my shoulder, over my hands, by myself, your law enforcement agencies were not there, your official capacity individuals were not there. I was there in order to dictate the law for the publication for the females, that such females should not be in the positions of decaying position. I'm the person in the whole of the Pakistan. And despite of all these transitional area, what we expect in the public sector is a question which is not being renderized in any sector of the law and order. When the concept of the decentralization of the law and order in the public sector is a concept which is not being incited by the public sector, what we just object is the resilience to the public sides. We have to consider that I said that the population of the Pakistan is more than 14 crore, 40 crore, and they said all of the Pakistani 28 crores. While you were ejaculating with your females and the 1/4 multiplication